I hate it here. Granted, I deserve it. I'm currently locked down behind massive concrete walls and solid steel doors in a maximum security penitentiary. I was locked up what feels like a long time ago now, but I earned it. I did. Every second I rot here is justice, but that doesn't change the fact that I hate it. It is cold here. I have a single concrete cot and toilet. My clothes itch and are too thin to keep any chills out. The walls are a gray with a sickly green tint due to the dull, swamp-like tile that sends a grossly colored glow into the room, reflecting the buzzing fluorescent light above me. The door is thick and unmoving. They paint it the same shade of sickly green as the floor. I assume it is lead-based to save on cost. Maybe if I lick it enough times, maybe I can kill enough brain cells to forget I'm here. I have no roommate, as many don't who are perceived as extreme risks. Thankfully, I can still have time outside and shower without being entirely supervised. More than I can say for many in here. My only commodity is my toilet paper and my journal. I earned the journal through much work and good behavior. The pencil I write with is dull and has no eraser, like that a golfer would use to keep scorecards. I am allowed 4 hours per day with it, between breakfast and lunch. I receive the journal and pencil with my meal and return it in kind. If the pencil has any pieces missing, or there are any extensive tears in the pages, then I will lose it for the following day. So, I comply. I comply so I may have some mild comfort in this concrete cage in which I slowly die. Again, I definitely earned it, but that doesn't change the fact that prison is hell. I earned my place here because I killed people. I killed many people. I killed 20 people to be exact. This is the first time I've actually written it. I beat the cannibal's number, which for some reason gave me a sense of accomplishment. However, what gave me more satisfaction was the evenness of the number, 20. 2, 0. 20. 20. 2, 0. 2, 0. 2, 0. 20. Even and smooth. My compulsion made it this way. 21 would have made getting arrested a living hell. 15 would have been okay, but 20 was much cleaner. Increments of 5, always increments of 5. Sometimes during a shopping trip, I would grab a stick of gum so as to have 20 or 10 or 30 items even. However, in the case of the killings, it was much more intense. The problem was the itch I felt in between. It was a gnawing pain in my mind from 1 to 4 and 6 to 9. The itch was not as bad during 5s, but 10s were the best. However, that number will eventually attract attention. The number is partially what got me caught, and I had to scratch the itch, so to speak. It made me empathize with vampires in the old horror stories, the sensation of aching thirst that cannot be quenched. It is nightmarish. The same remained true of my age, 40. I finished at 40, which made me content. I hated not having an even age. I could force down the bad feelings my age ended in 5s, or even numbers, but I always had bad years with 1s, 3s, 7s, and 9s. I digress. I understand it is abnormal behavior, but it's a compulsion. I have it manageable so that most would never notice in a day-to-day routine. I have to reminisce on these pages because I have no way of going back. It started many years ago, and the urge only grew from there. The first time I killed was interesting. I should have felt the need to immediately kill again as I did in later years, but I didn't. They say mental illness worsens with age. I guess that's what kept me from acting again so soon, but I'm not sure. The first time I killed was pretty lackluster. I was walking home from school through the woods where very few kids were bold enough to cross. While walking, I stumbled upon a man. He was clearly injured, and even at the age of 12, I knew he had little time left. He sat, holding his side, panting in labored breaths. He didn't see me yet. From my vantage point, I could see a long white bone jutting from his leg, which tells me the pain from what his ribs were doing was worse than that of a broken leg. That or he was just in shock. Far above this section of woods was a road, and from what I could see, a vehicle burst through the railing. The wrecked vehicle, a '69 Chevy C20 truck, lay decimated some 40 feet below the roadway in the brush and rocks. I remember this truck because I wound up purchasing one many, many years later in a secret nostalgia for myself. Either way, the driver had pulled himself from the wreckage and crawled in agony upwards of 50 feet to the nearest tree, where his strength was slowly failing him. I remember seeing a large shard of metal which had been ripped from the side of the truck and picking it up. I walked slowly to the man who reached pitifully towards me for help. I slowly shoved the sharp edge of the metal into the man's throat and watched as blood began to spurt from the wound in his mouth. He gargled like a drowning sow on his own blood, and after a time, he ceased all movement, forever. It was a rush of which I cannot explain. The excitement of ending a human life is next to none. I was content for a fleeting moment. I stared at the body for some time before taking a bloody shred of his pant leg that was hanging by a thread. I just wanted to have a keepsake. That was my first kill. I was never caught, nor even suspected. Growing up in the mountains of the South allowed much privacy, and it allowed me to get away with murder. As time grew, so did the feeling of power and accomplishment. I felt like God. No one even knew I was the way I was. I would never be a suspect because I knew to hide. I hid well because I knew how to hide. From the time I was a boy, I knew how to blend in. Sometimes it was a challenge because of my appearance, but I learned a simple skill: how to hide in plain sight. I was able to work hard in the background. I made good grades and maintained very few close friendships throughout school, so no one would discover anything about me. However, I made sure everyone had a nice thing to say about me, carrying groceries, helping kids with studying, always using manners. I graduated in the upper ranks of my class and soon attended the local college. After I earned a degree in business, I worked hard where I could and raised enough money to buy my own rig. I worked by riding the highways as a trucker for years and eventually bought 2 more rigs. By 35, I was a respectable business owner in my old town with a dispatch and a few drivers. I obviously still drove, even as the owner, because it kept me close to my only real passion. I hid well in plain sight because white people love a black guy. In a town of 90% white and 10% other, I learned to blend despite being a minority. Learn to talk like them, learn to walk like them, and you can manipulate them into whatever you want. I hate them. Not white people, all people. My mother died shortly after I graduated high school from heart failure, and I felt liberated, for I held her opinion highly. Her opinions often kept me in line and respectable. When she died, I was free to pursue my own interests. My father, while a good man in his own right, never held much weight in my actions, so I walked the path I chose for myself despite what his feelings may be. Either way, I dwindled for some time after the first murder. The urge slowly grew. By high school, I kept my eyes peeled for another opportunity to snuff out a life. Finally, that day came. The second time I murdered was equally uninspiring. I found myself at a graduation party, and the whole senior class was drinking heavily. All except me, that is. We were at the home of a wealthier student who had maintained a spotless record through both junior high and high school, and wanted to go out in a way where she could get out of her proverbial box. I learned 2 things that evening. The first, that a well-mannered, well-educated young lady was no different than anyone else in regards to having a darker side. She wanted to be remembered for a party, Not her good grades, nor her generous deeds, not her modest manner of dress, but a party. Everyone has a dark side in some way. This was the first thing I learned. The second was that if everyone is drunk and dancing on the roof, you could bump a certain young lady discreetly enough to send her 3 stories down into the concrete and make it look like an accident. She landed with a smack that can only be replicated in my dreams. This was the first time I was aroused by a killing. I'm not sure why. She was in a 2-piece, which I assume her parents knew nothing about, and her skin was pale and smooth. Her deep brown hair flowed past her shoulders, and the look of utter confusion and terror in the face of innocence was priceless. Blood pooled from her head and seeped into her nearby swimming pool. I fancied her, you could say, but only because she represented something that does not exist. Human innocence. When her skull cracked hard against the pavement, I was instantly excited. I had to sneak away to handle it and steal a memento from the girls' room. Meanwhile, the remaining partygoers descended into madness, trying to repair a situation that was far beyond broken. The chaos I caused that night again resurfaced my deep sense of accomplishment that only comes from death. This was the second time I killed. 18 years of age. By the time I hit my stride, I stood at 6'2" at 260 pounds. I had always enjoyed lifting weights and working towards my overall health. A fat predator is a bad predator. I maintained this level of fitness for most of my adult life. I had to, in order to pursue my passion. Of course, things would have a way of catching up with me. I was incarcerated with an unfortunate mountain of evidence. I wouldn't say I covered every base perfectly to ensure not getting caught, but I felt like I was careful enough. I guess not in hindsight. I remember the day I was arrested. I had turned 40 the month prior and was on the road delivering a shipment of plywood. I was behind the wheel of my rig in rural Alabama. I was taking a back road because I enjoy the scenery. And when you're the boss, you can set your own schedule. At this point, I had killed 19 people, and the itch was present. I would have to rub the back of my neck when I thought about it. It needed to be scratched. I needed to take care of it. That's when I saw her. Miles from any structure or any living person was a broken down baby blue Volkswagen Beetle. The emergency lights were flashing, and a woman was looking into her engine compartment. The height of my truck allowed me to scan both her car and the area surrounding us. It was tall, uncut grass and trees, covered in utter blackness due to the overcast night. There was no one for miles and miles. We could be alone, together. I pulled in behind her with my low lights so as not to scare her. When I stepped out of the truck, I addressed her. "Pardon me, ma'am," I said calmly. I know how to disarm. I have worked on my speaking voice for years in order to portray their security into my hands. "Are you all right?" She stepped out from behind her hood, and I saw her in better light. She was a young Hispanic woman. Her clothes were tattered, but I think that was intentional. She had silky dark hair to her shoulders and black librarian glasses. She was pretty, which was a bonus for me. Consider it like a dinner. You're going to get your meal, but when it includes dessert, then it is all the better. I also knew she could complete this cycle. She could be the 20th, and I could rest. Best yet, she was petite, so there would be little fight. "I think the engine is hot," she said in a desperation that these dark woods certainly played well into. She just wanted to get out of danger. Little did she know. "I can give you a ride. I own this company, so I can make the time." I didn't want to sound presumptuous, but I knew by making myself a manager, it would remove the creepy truck driver mentality. I don't know." "I promise," I edged in my best zippity-doo-dah voice. I can take you straight into town and we can find you a phone. My wife would kill me if I let a young lady stay stranded in the woods. I wasn't married, but that is another way of disarming her. A spouse always makes a man less dangerous. Or again, as she thought. Okay, she said with her fear betraying her skepticism. Thank you. I'll get the door for you. As she walked to the passenger side, I held the door open for her. As she took her first step up, I grabbed her ankle and pulled her straight down with as much force as I could manage. Her jaw connected with the studded metal stairs full force. I know some teeth were broken by the crunch that emanated from her skull. She fell limp to the dirt as I lifted her onto my shoulder. She didn't stir long enough for me to grab a large socket wrench from my rig. I could feel the warm blood from her mouth pouring down my shoulder. I carried her into the tall grass just out of sight. We made love then. I had made love before to some, but this was special. She was the 20th. She would complete the need. Halfway through, she began to wake and struggle. From there, I had to act. I took the socket wrench and began to hit her. She struggled to scream due to her shattered jaw. I hit her in her pretty face. Over and 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 over. When I had finished on all fronts, I took her wallet from her jeans off beside us. Hannah, I believe her name was. I took her glasses as they fell off when her face collided with my truck and avoided the wrath of the socket wrench. They had her name engraved inside the temple. I drove, leaving the scene entirely. I had to re-enter the highway sometime later and saw lights in my mirror. I had been stopped before, once even with a body in the back, so I was not worried. The officer walked to the side and called me out. You Williams? My last name. He asked with an unreadable demeanor. Yes, sir, I answered coolly, holding my ID and paperwork for the truck and delivery. He then spoke into his radio. Yeah, we found him. Officer, what's this I was cut short. Sir, please turn around and place your hands behind your back. Why? I demanded. I was not about to be cuffed and restrained for no good reason. He then turned me violently to my truck and slapped cuffs around my wrists. From there, he sat me on the pavement and called for backup. When other officers arrived, one finally noticed the blood on my back. They then found the glasses. They then found the poorly wiped down socket wrench. They then received word of a brutal mutilation several towns over. They had stopped me initially because one of my drivers was caught with a brick of marijuana, and they wanted to stop all trucks from my dispatch to make sure we were legitimate. It would be funny if it weren't so infuriating. I was brought down on a technicality. My run lasted from 12 to 40. I was undetected for that entire time. I changed my MO. I killed strangers only. I was so careful. A technicality was the only thing that could have done this. My simple home was turned about until they found my treasure box, a shoebox of souvenirs and news clippings. From there, it was easy to put me at every single murder, every homeless person stabbed to death in cities, every transient prostitute with their heads missing, every unsupervised child in crowded streets. I was linked to them all. Now, one may ask, why would you be so stupid as to keep mementos? To that, I would say I had to. It was my passion and the only thing that gave me meaning. I had to keep something around. They were the only memories I could have of those times. Like I first wrote, I deserve to be in prison, but I don't regret in the slightest what I've done. The trial was grueling and irritating. Since I killed across state lines, there was arguments as to where to have my trial, but it became a federal issue, which only meant more bureaucracy. My lawyer explained many of the killings would be circumstantial at best, but just as many have by now connected DNA to the scene and are going to be nearly impossible to deny. I decided to throw in the towel. The media was out for blood. The public was out for blood. and the jury was out for blood. I had my fill, so now it was time to pay the favor forward. There was no way to avoid a life sentence, so I may as well come clean and get regale the tales of my exploits to a room of terrified jurors and family members burning with hatred. Despite the difficulties of finding some evidence of murders, I was still convicted for 18 of the 20. However, I was punished for them all, regardless. The day of sentencing, I stood still and stoic before the judge. I could feel the eyes of all those present attempting to sear me, but failing. The judge looked down at me and rambled on about my cruelties and resentment for man. The entire time he droned, I stood with the thought that the death penalty was illegal in this state. It was utterly satisfying to know the uproarious crowds calling for my head, when the law wouldn't allow it. I snapped out of it when he got to the sentence. Seeing as how the death penalty is illegal in this state, I can only do the most with that in light. I hereby sentence you to 1,001 life sentences. He was being melodramatic. Not in history had there been such an absurd sentence. What's worse, the number was uneven, meaning the rest of my life I would have to say 1,001 when discussing my sentence. He knew this. My demeanor slightly shaken, I asked the judge, "Why 1,001? The courtroom was silent. The families, friends, and jury looked at me with contempt, but that didn't matter then, even less now. The judge leaned over his podium. He smiled with a smugness that still boils my blood, and he calmly replied, "To torment you." That's how I got where I am now. I don't interact with the other inmates or the guards. I just mind my business as best I can. I don't like to think about my sentence because it makes me itch, similar to when you haven't paid a certain bill but don't have the funds. It's a wincing mental discomfort. I write the rest of this in a testament to what happened yesterday, in hopes it reaches someone on the outside. My day started normally. A loud bell rang and I stood to my feet. From there, my door opened and I walked to the shower facility. I tried to find myself at the end of the line so as to get the most time out of my cell. I also like my privacy. The inmates here are insufferable. They are uneducated criminals who would have no life outside of these walls. My fellow black inmates gave me hell for being crazy, since African American serial killers are considered such an abnormality. The other races tended to stay to themselves, minus a few Aryan Brotherhood members casting the occasional slur my direction. I entered the shower as normal, but I felt an innate sense of dread that I don't know how to describe. It just felt unpleasant. I felt watched and alone at the same time. I felt completely hopeless and near despair. I quickly finished my shower and left the facility. The halls were quiet and the stationary guard was not at his post in front of my cell. I was alone in this hallway. Suddenly, I felt a large hand grip my shoulder and order me forward. The next thing I knew, I was being escorted to the warden's office. I was somewhat stunned, but complied. I walked the tight enclosed halls until I reached the last room on the right. Inside was totally dark, apart from a dim lamp illuminating a desk. The hand shoved me in and slammed the door behind me. I saw the silhouette of Warden, and he beckoned me to sit. I sat across from him in uncomfortable silence. He didn't move, and neither did I. I would force him to make the first move. After what felt like an eternity, he spoke up. "Let's go over your file." His voice carried, a mild southern accent sprinkled in. I did not respond. He gave no indication as to why, so I would bide my time. From here I will paraphrase what was said, as my memory can't perfectly recreate the entire conversation. Count 1. Confessed. Not convicted. Man falls off cliff and you assist him in passing. You were 12, so it wasn't included in your final file, but it warrants mentioning. Count 2. Confessed. Convicted. You confessed to shoving a young woman off a roof and then robbing her home of a trophy. You were 18. Count 3. Confessed, convicted. Homeless man near your college. You stabbed him and cut out a tooth. You were 20. Count 4. Confessed, not convicted. You claim to have shot a prostitute in Texas. The souvenir you took could not link you to the crime, and she had no family. You were 24. Not convicted, but you know what you did. Counts 5 through 9. Confessed, convicted on all accounts. You killed 5 lot lizards before changing your MO. That was smart. They were all strangled and you kept a lock of hair, left them on the highway. Count 5. Confessed, convicted. You took a lost 12-year-old and drowned him. You kept his retainer. You were doing well in life by this point, but murder still called, didn't it? Count 11. Confessed, convicted. This one was special, wasn't she? That gas station employee who you stalked for a while. Followed her home and broke in. Took your time and did it right. She broke your perfect streak and you were going to make her pay, right? Kept her locket as a token of your affection. Count 12. Confessed, convicted. You took a young man from a local club in Missouri, strangled him the moment the door was closed, chopped him up, and kept his teeth. Counts 13 through 17. Confessed, convicted on all counts. The hitchhiker phase. Here it seemed you just wanted to close the gap. You got sloppy, left a lot of evidence behind. I guess because they were vagrants, it wouldn't have mattered. Count 18. Confessed, convicted. You killed a housewife in Florida. You were on vacation at them time. You spotted her and just had to do something. Waiting until her husband left and had yourself a time. Another rape and strangling. You took her blood-soaked necklace. Count 19. Confessed, convicted. You saw a jogger one morning and followed in your truck. When you knew their routine, you waited in the bushes until he passed. You killed him with a hammer and took one of his shoes. Count 20. Confessed, convicted. The one that brought you down. You couldn't resist her. You were too careless, too excited. Now you're here. You took her glasses and bashing her head in and assaulting her. He took a deep breath and his outline sat back. Do you know what they call you? He asked me incredulously. I was livid. He completely bastardized my work. I had done so much, and he swept over it like an obituary column. I glared at him in the dark before answering. The scavenger hunt killer? I hated that name. They donned me the scavenger hunt killer because my murder spanned so far and I collected odd, disconnected items. Again, my works and efforts were reduced to a joke. It still makes me sick. The warden spoke up again. Are you sorry? I sat for a moment before responding. Would it matter? He chuckled in a deep, throaty laugh. No, he said, settling in. I guess it wouldn't. He continued. I don't get it, really. You're a highly intelligent, healthy, and well-spoken man. Why on earth would you throw that away? I sat in angry silence. I refused to give this man the satisfaction of an answer. Do you believe in God? The warden asked. His tone now changed. I chewed my tongue before responding. No. Pity, he responded lackadaisically, as if my response didn't really matter. That would make what I'm about to tell you much better. I waited for him to continue. Your sentence is being commuted. I raised an eyebrow in disbelief. Really? Yes, he sat, still shadowed, but I knew he was smirking. What does God have to do with it? I know I should have had much more important questions to ask in that moment, but I was curious. I assumed he meant I should be thankful. Well, he said, his voice trailing, that would make this next part easier. You passed away this morning, son. Before I could respond, his hand tossed a few photos in front of me. It was me. I lay covered in blood on the shower floor. I had been stabbed from the looks of it. Yeah, the warden, or who I thought was the warden, spoke up. Some Aryan fella wanted to prove his might by stabbing a serial killer to death in the shower. Didn't work, though, since he was caught, and will most likely be in solitary until it does irreparable damage, if that's some comfort. I stared at him. I stared at the photographs. I simply could not accept it. This is absurd. I felt insulted in the prospect. I know it seems odd, but hear me out. He sat upright, ready to make his case. Do you know what the Universalists are? No. Well, he continued without missing a beat. Basically, it states that everyone gets into heaven, even if you aren't necessarily in their denomination. This is heaven? I was ready to laugh. This was a joke. No, see, that's the bad news, he continued. Catholics, Muslims, some Buddhists, see, they believe in a temporal plane, so they're also sort of right. See, everyone does eventually move on, but before anyone can move on, they must resolve all their earthly obligations and judgments. Before I could remark, he caught his breath and explained further. You died this morning. You served one of your 1,001 life sentences. Welcome to number 2. I stood up. This isn't funny. I'm leaving. I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, unable to use my body. My eyes felt like they were being pried towards the seat. Please, I heard the warden, though his voice was now much deeper, sinking my gut. Sit. I returned to my seat with a sensation that was new to me. Fear. Now, he continued, his voice returning to normal. You're not dead. You just started another sentence. Everything will be back to normal when you leave, when I dismiss you. You will leave here and return to your bunk. Do you understand? I nodded, still stunned by what I then knew as truth. His voice. The unexplained dread I felt that morning. I walked out of the warden's office that day, feeling a hopelessness I have never known. The prison was the same, but it wasn't. It was lonelier, darker. That feels like forever ago. I learned since then. First, lifetime does not mean from the age you are incarcerated. I expected a 40-year life sentence. But after speaking with a few other inmates, serving like myself, who I see sometimes sparingly, I learned that it varies somewhere from 80 to 120 years. It varies, but it is always at least 80. I guess the guards don't notice after a certain point. Also, I assume they don't register that we never seem to leave. Inexplicable, but that's what's happening. Second, each go-around changes you. The prisoners don't notice you. The others like you have fewer words. The guards seemed always outside of the line of sight. Even when they would interact, they were like fleeting shadows. I am cracking mentally. I will walk into the showers and see someone shaving, even speak with him at length. However, when I turn a corner or close a stall door, he'll be gone when I return. Next, I learned that suicide doesn't work. I learned the same way every inmate in here like me does. I slit my wrists, and they just ached for a week. I swallowed bleach and had a miserable stomachache, but no death. I hung myself where I choked and flailed, fully conscious, for 8 straight hours, until a guard found me while bringing my breakfast the following morning. I learned that being murdered decreases time, but murdering adds it. So no one on life row attempts murder here. Finally, escaping isn't an option. We have runners sometimes, men who just finished their sentence. The guy just snapped. I guess he pulled maybe 60 years before dying in his sleep. He just panicked and ran. The snipers didn't even turn. He grabbed the fence and immediately fell to the ground. From there, he shook violently. He died right there of a heart attack. I saw him a week later. 3rd life sentence, half crippled. I guess we get punished if we try to leave. I don't know if it's permanent. He was a wreck upon returning. It reminded me of the cats in my neighborhood as a boy. The first time you hurt it, the animal twitches and becomes neurotic. But given enough time, it accepts its fate. The man now spends his days staring silently behind dead eyes at whatever light source is around. To some, this is limbo, where we remain trapped in the prison in which we were condemned until our body and soul have finished their sentences. To others, this is some kind of purgatory, where we are groomed for eternity in paradise. Either way, we are forced to remain, forced to live until we pay our dues, never truly dying. I don't even know if time is the same now, but if you're reading this, I managed to successfully get these pages out. I have a handful of plans which I cannot record. I cannot risk any future attempts should this fail. I'm leaving this journal for anyone who is a criminal or wants to become one. I have between 80,000 to 100,000 years left. I do not feel remorse. But I do wish I knew then what I know now. This is simply a warning. 100,000 years on a concrete slab, a hard, unforgiving surface. 100,000 years with 1 hour a day in a dying earthscape I barely recognize. 100,000 years of sickly green floors and cold steel doors that move for nothing. 100,000 years of mopping floors or scrubbing toilets. 100,000 years of being monitored by beings I cannot fully comprehend as their burning horror erupts in the back of my mind. 1,001 life sentences. 1,000 to go. Only one small thing gives me comfort. With 1,000 life sentences, at least it's a nice, clean number. I hope I don't die too soon and ruin this nice, even lifetime. Because the next one will be hell.
Only the dead have seen the end of war. Plato said that once, but if it were true, then my war would have been over a long time ago. While dead inside, I guess I'm not technically deceased, although I should be. It was November 2004 and I was in Fallujah. My tank crew and I were gearing up to take over the city. We knew those bastards were dug in deep, and it was going to be a hell of a fight. The smell of diesel and grease hung over us at all times. The grime on my skin felt like sandpaper. It didn't matter how many showers I took. The dirt remained. Roscoe, my loader, a short, wiry guy who most would describe as a pretty boy, was joking around while we lined up in the staging area. Row upon row of the machines of destructions got prepared, and men with the latest technology to kill boarded them. As long as I had known Roscoe, he had always been a prankster. We came up the ranks together, thick as blood. If he hadn't gotten into trouble all the time, he probably would have been promoted to sergeant before me. Sometimes I found myself the butt of his antics. Despite his fondness for assholery, I loved him like a brother. Any rotten situation we found ourselves in, he managed to make it better. It was about 03:30. The coffee in my cup had turned to a warm mud. We all rolled in laughter as he convinced the new private, who was almost the opposite of our loader in appearance, tall, bulky, and had a face like a dog, that he needed to yell down the main gun of the tank to perform a boom check. Should have seen it. Our driver, with his face in the gun tube, hollering as loud as he could. 03:45 is when the orders came down to move out. I extinguished my smoke and hopped on Creeping Death. That was the name of our tank. It fit. The old girl could end your life before you even heard her. She had an extensive body count, over 150 insurgents, and at least 10 tanks by my estimations. Initially, the attack started off as a success. The bomb raids and artillery barrage had done their job and cleared out much of the rabble. The ones that were left behind, however, were the hardest fighters, and they hadn't planned to give up easily. Once we hit the main city, our formation began to break up. What had been a tight column of 4 tanks joined by an infantry company got split up into small squads. The tight roads, cluttered with debris and buildings, made an advance in standard formation impossible. Our infantry platoon was spread out, fighting in separate buildings. "Contact left," our tank commander yelled out. "Gunner, building, heat," came the fire order. "Identify," I hollered back. Roscoe yelled, "Up," which indicated that he had my round loaded. Took about 2 seconds. Could always trust that guy to have the gun ready when needed. "Fire," came the command. "On the way," I said as I squeezed the triggers. The boom from the report shook the ground. The building collapsed as 120 millimeters of hate slammed into its side, sending a fireball through it. Dust and smoke filled the air, which made visibility 0. That's probably why we didn't see what happened next. Our wingman drove off, despite an inability to see where they were going, and hit an improvised explosive device, commonly known as an IED. Normally, tanks are well armored, but the underside is comparatively soft. The blast ripped its belly out and killed everyone inside. This sprung an ambush, and insurgents stormed out of the buildings that surrounded us. Our infantry did their best to fight them off. I switched to the coax machine gun and laid waste to anything moving that wasn't our own. The tank commander and Roscoe manned their machine guns as well, and laid down a lead curtain. This made us a prime target. Soon we found our back end hit with a rocket-propelled grenade. The explosion triggered the safety mechanism that launches all the stored tank rounds out of their hold. It's supposed to keep us safe so they don't go off from a fire inside the tank. The engine erupted from the impact and sent shrapnel flying into the air, which shredded much of our own infantry. Those of us inside the tank were not critically wounded. I spun the gun tube over the back and hauled our driver out. Roscoe and the tank commander grabbed guns, then went out the top hatches. Smoke from burning fuel screened us as we made our escape into a nearby building. Not sure if to leave our tank was the best idea, but it was on fire and the air had become poisonous with fumes. We went into the building and were presented with a hallway that had a few rooms branching off from it. Our driver took point and examined the first doorway for any traps. After he made sure it was clear, he kicked it in and went to the left. I went right and yelled out, "Short room." This indicated that the other two need not come in. The room was empty, so we went to the next one and repeated the process. Coming to the third and final room, we lined up at the fatal funnel. Door was checked, then opened. The driver had taken a few steps in, and I was right behind him, when a small troop of combatants came down a set of stairs. Their first round went into our driver's neck, killing him instantly and spraying me with blood. A bullet hit me in the shoulder. I didn't have time to bleed. Kept firing and knocked 2 of them down in rapid succession. Roscoe took a round to the knee, which caused him to drop. The tank commander hit the other 2 insurgents. Then the room went silent. We left Roscoe to tend to himself, while the tank commander and I went to check out the upstairs. There was a small cache of arms, but no more fighters. We returned to Roscoe. He had become as white as a sheet. His pulse and breathing were elevated. Clearly, shock had set in. The round had hit his artery. Blood was spilled all over the concrete floor. I saw he had wasted his first aid kit and pulled out my own to apply a tourniquet to his wound. His usual bright, shining blue eyes were now a dull gray. He wasn't dead, yet, but without immediate medical attention, he soon would be. The tank commander helped me with my injury. The bullet had gone straight through, leaving a seeping hole that erupted with blood every time I moved. "I'll go out and take a look around to get our bearings," the tank commander said, then made his way to a back door in the room. In his haste, he failed to check the entry for any traps. A thunderous explosion occurred, and soon he ended up as a pink mist all over the wall. The door had been wired to prevent anyone from sneaking in from behind. In that plaster room, with bullet holes cut into the walls like Swiss cheese, Roscoe and I lay on the ground, too tired and afraid to move. "Josh," Roscoe managed to say in between gasps of breath, "we can't stay here all day." I knew he was right. I grabbed him, then lifted him to his feet. Slowly and painfully we made our way out the door that our tank commander had recently cleared. As we exited the building, A long, desolate alleyway lay in front of us. It offered some protection from the sides, but would have been like shooting fish in a barrel from anyone up top. With no other choice, we made our way down the ominous route. About halfway down, I turned to look at our six. It was then that I saw an odd-looking soldier. He wasn't dressed like one of ours. His uniform was all black, and the shemagh he wore didn't tie in front. Wasn't sure who he was, but he didn't look friendly. He ducked into the building we previously had left. Maybe he was an insurgent sent to get the weapons from the cache. Not wanting to find out, we quickened our pace. We had to stop every so often to let Roscoe rest or to adjust his tourniquet. This slowed us down considerably. Gunfire still raged all around us. Our hearts would jump every time there was a big explosion. It was at a rest stop that I saw the soldier again. He was tall, really tall, probably well over 6'3" and kind of lanky. His face was unidentifiable as the shemagh cast a shadow over it. He had a long rifle with a wicked bayonet that gleamed at its end. I knew he had seen us this time as his pace quickened toward us. "Come on, Roscoe. We gotta move it. Now," I said as I picked him up, which caused my other shoulder to throb. The hostile reduced the distance fast. He had started out over a football field away. Now he was almost on top of us. The speed at which he moved was inhuman. There was a door that came up on our right. I switched my hold on Roscoe, threw him into it, then spun and drew my weapon ready for a fight. In the split second it took for me to adjust my vision, the other man was gone. Bewildered, I looked around while crouching and retreated into the doorway. "What was that, Josh?" Roscoe asked. "You saw it too?" I inquired. "Yeah, we got to get back to our own lines. They got ghost insurgents out here," he said with a groan, then folded over to massage his wound. He looked worse. Any color that was left had now vanished. "I never thought it could happen, but I'm somehow more white than usual," he said with a smile. Classic Roscoe. Even in the face of death, he'd make jokes. "Come on, white boy," I said, lifting him again. "Let's get you to a tanning bed." "I'd rather lay out by a pool. Maybe some girls in small bikinis could feed me grapes." "Sure, buddy. Whatever you'd like," I replied. With that, we were back in the drear alleyway once more. It soon came to be that the alley ended and we had to cross a road to proceed. I ducked down and peered around the corner to get a good look at what was happening. The road was quiet. Bodies littered it, scattered here and there, but there was no action happening. We crossed quickly so as not to be exposed for long. Something caught my attention as we crossed and I stopped mid-stride. There, in the road, was the guy in black again. I hadn't seen him when I had first looked, but he was clearly there now. From body to body he went, lifting their hands. As he did so, a slight blue flash was visible. "Roscoe?" I asked. "I see it, Josh. Let's run," he responded. We moved as quickly as we could. The sudden burst must have caught the man in black's attention. He was on us again and gained just as fast as before. My heart pounded a deafening rhythm in my ears. Must have been why I didn't notice Roscoe as he yelled at me to stop. He fell to the ground. I went a few more feet before realizing what had happened. A quick spin around showed me the insurgent was no more than a foot behind us. I rushed to my friend and grabbed him by the back of his uniform with my good hand, then began to run as I towed him behind. He drew a sidearm, shot after shot blasted at the black figure. The bullets did nothing but pass straight through the other man. Another door came up. With a swift glance to make sure there were no traps, I pulled Roscoe in. This time the dark figure didn't disappear. He followed us through the entryway. "Oh shit," my buddy exclaimed. "It has no face, Josh." For the first time I got a good look at this mystery man. Where his face should have been, there was only bone. No flesh covered its skull. His eyes were burning red with murderous intent. In those eyes I saw the death of 1,000 lifetimes. "Fuck me," was all I could say as I ran down a hallway with Roscoe towed right behind. "I don't want to die. Josh, I don't want to die." The sound of my best friend echoed in my ears as I ran for our lives. The man in black was relentless in his pursuit. There was a stairway straight ahead. As far as I could see, it was the only way out of that place. When we got to them, it was observed that it had a trap door that covered the exit. Without a moment to lose, I pulled Roscoe up over my shoulders. A scream escaped me as the pain from my injured shoulder coursed through my body. We ascended, checked the door for wires, then threw it open. Now, on top of the roof, I turned and slammed the trapdoor shut before the other man could get through. I stood on it to supply more weight, but nothing else happened. There was some fallen masonry that I went to go pull over onto the door. Roscoe and I went to the edge of the building. There was no way down. We were trapped. Long the moments felt, just sitting there waiting for the end. If that man wanted us so badly, why hadn't he come and got us? This question was too big for my exhausted brain to struggle with. My battle buddy wasn't holding out well at all. He coughed up blood and drifted in and out of consciousness. Stay with me, buddy," I would say while delivering small slaps to his face to bring him back. It had been quiet ever since we crossed the street, but now gunfire rang out again. I took a peek over the edge of the small wall that surrounded the roof and could see Allied forces were making a push towards us. "They're coming, Roscoe. Just a little longer. Hang in there," I said to reassure him. Not a second later, I heard the whistle of artillery rounds come down around us. Violent explosions occurred all about, but there was no place to take cover. One came down on the roof we were on, blasting a large hole. The roof began to crumble and slide into the empty darkness of the building below. Bit by bit, our last harbor of safety slipped into the dark void beneath. A bony hand reached up from the blackness and grabbed hold of Roscoe's ankle. "Josh," my friend cried out, "don't let him take me." I grabbed his hand, but it was clammy and slick. My other hand grabbed his sleeve for a better grip. Below me, in the inky blackness of the deteriorating building, two small burning eyes could be seen. My soul went cold. Racked with exhaustion, hurt and weakened by all that had happened, I felt my grip loosen. "Josh, I love you, bro," Roscoe said to me with tears in his eyes. This spurned a second wind and I pulled back even harder, but it was all for nothing. The extra force reopened my wound. Blood poured down, forced out by the muscles now pushed to their limits. The increased viscosity caused his hand to slip free. Then he slid out of his uniform top as he plunged to the nothingness below. I sat there, staring off for a million miles. After a bit, I looked at my hands. Those weak hands that couldn't save my best friend. The one that had been with me through everything, thick or thin. Then the tears came. Dizzy from the lack of blood, I laid there, crying until the din of battle around me echoed into oblivion. When I came around, I was in a field hospital. The doctors said I was lucky to live. The amount of blood that had been lost had me on death's doorstep. They didn't know how right they were. Later, I got sent back to the rear to recover. After months of rehab, I was finally discharged. It took years of therapy to recover from the incident. Every time I told someone I had stared death in the face, they assumed I meant metaphorically. I know what I saw was real, as Roscoe had seen it too. Still, with no one who believed me, I felt isolated and alone. The psychologists say I have PTSD and survivor's guilt. Maybe they're right. But ever since that day, I've been looking for the man I saw. I've been looking for death. Even became a mercenary and went back into war to try and find him. Once in a while, I'll catch a glimpse of him on the battlefield. His never came for me, though. It could be that I do a good job keeping him in business. People, like the doctors, say that I was lucky to have lived. I didn't live, though. I died that day on the rooftop, when my best friend was snatched away. So, I guess Plato is a liar. The war doesn't end after you die. It rages still within me, every damn day.
Hello everyone, Night Terror here. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to Bad Vibes for including me on this collaboration. And with that being said, today's story is written by Reddit user Nocturnal Nanny, Mr. Lackavote. I'm not sure if this will help anyone, but if my story saves even one person from the nightmares I now endure, I'll consider it a win. I've borrowed a phone that was smuggled in here, and the orderly that now monitors every move I make will be coming shortly, so I must be brief. A few days ago, I was laying in bed scrolling through Reddit, like I always do to make myself sleepy, when I came across this story that sent shivers up my spine. After I was done reading, I thought to myself, wow, that was terrifying, and then scrolled to the next one. Big mistake. 20 minutes later, I heard scratching noises coming from my bedroom door, and I froze. Confused as I live alone, I turned on the lamp next to me and looked towards my bedroom door. Silence. After a moment, I decided it was my mind playing tricks on me. After all, I was reading scary stories in the dark. Probably not the best thing to do before bed, but hey, who doesn't love a good spine-chilling story before they close their eyes? I went back to scrolling through NoSleep when, again, I heard a long scratch on the door. I slowly got out of bed and tiptoed over to the noise. Grabbing the door handle, I gently opened it and peeked into my living room, only to find it vacant. I quietly closed the door and turned to walk back towards my bed when my closet door flew open. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when it comes to fight or flight reaction, I seem to choose the option that leaves you frozen in place with your eyes closed. A defense mechanism instilled in me from childhood and stories of the boogeyman. After a moment, I decided to open my eyes and cautiously look towards my closet. I physically heard the clock that was placed on my nightstand stop ticking. And that's when I met him. He was almost 8 feet tall, standing on a long, spiny-looking set of legs, with impossibly long arms that seemed to stretch on forever. What I could see of his body looked to be covered in deep, dark cracks. He was wearing a long, hooded cloak that touched the floor, as black as midnight on a moonless night, that slightly revealed his ruby-red eyes. "Who are you?" I said with a shaky voice. He never physically moved his mouth, but I heard him speak into my soul with the most sinister voice.
"I am Mr. Lackavote, and I'm here to right your wrong."
Petrified, frozen in place, I tried to ask him what wrong I'd done, but before I could finish, he was right in front of me. His breath smelt of rotting flesh and death itself as he breathed down my face. He reached out and ran his long, bony fingers across my cheek, and instantly I knew what he could do. I felt my eyes being ripped from my head and the burning sensation that followed. I began to scream, but no sound came out. I was stuck in my own personal hell as darkness surrounded me. Alone and afraid, I wanted to die. I wanted the agony to end. Again, I heard his voice as if it were in my own thoughts.
"I am the keeper of votes. You know what you did. You will right your wrong, or I will take your eyes, along with your eternal soul. You have 24 hours."
Just as fast as he'd appeared, Mr. Lackavote had vanished. I did not sleep the rest of the night. I had visions of the horror I had just endured that left me sweating and cold at the same time. Had I dreamt the whole thing? Could my mind even make up something so sinister and evil? And the pain. Oh Lord, the pain I felt. I've never experienced anything close to that kind of suffering in my entire life. The next morning, pacing my apartment, I tried my hardest to think of what I had done wrong. Did I forget to vote in the recent election? Had I missed an employee poll at work? What the hell had I not voted on that was so important that my soul depended on it? Trying to clear my head, I decided to open Reddit, as it always seemed to make me feel better and relax. While I was scrolling, I passed the story I'd read the night before. The one that had made the hair on the back of my neck stand. That's when it clicked. I had scrolled to the next one before I gave that story the upvote it deserved. Instantaneously, I clicked the up arrow and waited, hoping with every part of my being that was the answer. Was I playing a guessing game with my life? I waited the whole day. I didn't eat, I didn't move, I barely even breathed. I thought about writing to my family and sorting my goodbyes out, but I felt too incredibly empty to conjure up the words. No one would have believed me anyways. As the sun slowly set, I decided I might as well wait in my room and hope that I'd redeemed myself, or possibly chance losing my eyes and my soul. The thought of that alone made me vomit into the trash can next to my bed and tremble violently with deep, petrifying terror. When my 24-hour mark finally came, I closed my eyes, held my breath, and waited. Prayed, begged that my soul would be saved and all would be forgiven. Silence. Then, I heard the breathing. I smelled the rotting flesh. I felt all the hair on my body raise. When I finally opened my eyes, I felt a chill that froze me to the bone, as if I was sitting inside a freezer meant for the dead. There he was, right in front of me. His eyes had turned to sapphires as he stared into my soul.
Don't let it happen again,
he bellowed in a voice that to this day still haunts my dreams. And then he was gone. I know some of you won't believe me. Hell, I'm not even sure if I believe myself. As the doctor here says, it's all in my head. But for the love of your eyeballs and your soul, do not forget to vote while you're reading stories on Reddit, or you too will have the pleasure of meeting Mr. Lackavote for yourself.
I work security at Disney World, the happiest place on earth. Typically, I wouldn't say where I work, as obviously there are some pretty strict rules about things employees can put online, but I just don't think I can tell this properly without that context. And honestly, I think this may be it for me anyway with this job. I just can't see myself working here any longer now. I've been with the company for 23 years. The first 20 years I worked in the parks, nabbing shoplifters and rounding up people who were drinking too much for the heat. Occasionally there'd be a fight to break up, but people usually kept it pretty mild. The heat and walking was getting to be too much for me the last few years, so I asked to be transferred somewhere with AC. The company moved me to one of their resorts, and while the working conditions were 110% better as far as climate and comfort go, the guest issues were trickier, mainly domestics. I guess the expensive stress of vacation got to a lot of people, and I'd be called by neighboring rooms because some mom and dad were yelling at each other. I'd try to suggest they take a nap or go do separate activities for a bit, and that would usually calm them down. But none of that is what I'm here for. I've got to get this out while I have time. 3 days ago, I got a call from management. Apparently a couple of days before that, housekeeping had went into a room that should have been turned over that day. Turned over is when one guest leaves by about 11 a.m. and the next guest checks in around 3 p.m. All of the guests' items were still in the room. Housekeeping made a note of it and moved on, But during the next 2 days when they entered the room, everything was still there and untouched. I went to check it out, and sure enough, there was an empty room full of luggage, clothes, some toys, everything a family would need for vacation. The manager had already looked up the previous reservation, and it was for a family. A dad, mom, and 2 little kids. I tried to call the phone numbers they had given us, but all I got was their voicemail. We were a bit stumped, so I decided to make the call that housekeeping could clean the room and take the family's personal items to be held until we got in contact with someone. I went digging into the reservation more. The family had arrived 5 days before housekeeping discovered all their stuff. I found that the family had paid a parking fee and their vehicle description was listed. A quick walk of the parking lots and I easily located their vehicle. So that ruled out a car accident or them deciding to just leave all their stuff behind. Next, I saw that they purchased a dining plan. This is when a guest prepays for all of their food. They're given a certain number of credits to use for meals. This family had only used 3 credits, and the last one was 2 days after they checked in. It appeared that the day they arrived, they got here late and probably just stayed on the resort. The next day, they used 2 credits at Epcot. The second park day they used just 1 credit at Magic Kingdom, and it was at breakfast time. Now, at Disney, we have something called Magic Bands. Magic Bands are worn by guests and act as a room key, park ticket, credit card, dining reservation payment, and a fast pass, which is a system used to bypass lines. It took some work, but I was finally able to look up this family's fast pass history. The day they went to Magic Kingdom, they had breakfast at a restaurant in the park, rode a couple of rides, and then rode their last ride at 11 a.m. It's a small world. Then nothing. Finally, it was time to bring in someone else on this. I called an old coworker at Magic Kingdom and asked him to pull the security footage for It's a Small World at the time they wrote it. I made my way over there, and when I got there, my friend was very confused, almost distraught. He showed me what he found. There's usually a camera in the direction of where the rides load and unload. The footage showed the family scanning their bands to use fast passes for the ride and then boarding the ride. The footage from the exit of the ride just showed the other people in their car exiting, but the family wasn't there. Of course, we immediately thought the worst. Maybe one of the kids had fallen out and mom and dad and the other kid got off in the middle of the ride to help, and they all got injured or killed or stuck in the machinery somewhere. So we shut down the ride, middle of the damn day, turned off that earworm music and turned up the lights. Me and my buddy walked that ride 3 times before we called in help. Eventually, there was close to 10 cast members searching, and we didn't find shit, except for 3 cell phones and a hat. I was stumped. I've kept digging the past couple of days, and I'm not sure who to tell what I found. I've called the police, and I suppose they're on their way. But the company has a way of covering up things like this, and I decided I can't live with myself if I don't put out some type of warning. I kept digging into their reservation over the last couple of days, and today I noticed that they had purchased a memory maker. There are photographers all over the parks and cameras in a lot of the rides, and with a memory maker pass, the photos are all free. They automatically get added to a guest Disney account when the system knows their picture has been taken. And the system always knows. Everyone's whereabouts are always known with the Magic Bands. Well, I opened up their memory maker photo album, and I swear, there's 732 pictures. The first 30 or so look pretty normal. Epcot, a few rides, some in front of the castle, but the rest are all in It's a Small World. The rides only take 1 picture per go-around, so it appears as though this family has ridden this ride over 700 times. The first picture looked right. Everyone looked happy. It was a busy day and a full car of guests. The next one is rough to look at. The car is empty except for this little family, and they look so darn confused. The next 10 to 15, I can see Dad getting angry, yelling. Mom is holding on to those two kids like her life depends on it, and you can see the kids getting increasingly upset, crying. And it goes on and on and on. After 50 or so, it looks like they're trying to get out. In one, the dad is missing. In another, they're all gone. Maybe like they've bailed early in the ride and tried to walk out. But in the very next one, they're all right back in the damn car. After around 450 or so, I only see the mom and kids. It's just when I look closely, I can see Dad. Maybe just his body now, slumped down in one of the other seats. Since about 675, there's just Mom and one kid. Another body in another seat. The mom and kid aren't moving anymore. I think the two of them are still alive, just damn near catatonic, looking straight ahead, pale. And I swear on my fucking life, the dolls are moving or something. In some of these pictures, I can tell they aren't where they're supposed to be. I even saw one with a doll in the car with his family. I can't look anymore. I think I'm going to lose my lunch. I closed the album. Its file size has increased since I closed it. God, are there new pictures being added? I see on the security cameras that the local PD just arrived, so they'll be taking this over soon. I wish I knew what the fuck was going on, but I also wish this damn thing had never landed in my lap in the first place. I don't think I'll be able to update this. After I talk to the police, I think I'm going to walk out of here and never come back. I just wanted to get this out there before Disney feeds the media some bullshit cover-up as to why a whole family vanished. They didn't vanish. I know where they are.
I first met the demon when I was 17, and on that night, he saved my life. I was standing at the bus stop, waiting to catch a ride from my after-school job. I had forgotten my umbrella that day, and as you know, it always rains when you forget your umbrella. It was coming down in freezing bucketfuls, and I was trying to ignore the fact that I was floating in my own shoes. Suddenly, the rain above me stopped, and I looked up to see him, the demon, shielding me with his umbrella. He looked like a person put together by someone who didn't know what a human being looked like. He was long and lanky, 6.5 feet at least, and his shoulders were hunched forward so that his profile resembled a giant vulture. His face was gaunt, all sharp edges and deep hollows, and across it was a plastered, wide, friendly smile of crooked grey teeth. "Haven't you heard, friend?" he asked. "No," I said. "Heard what?" "The bus isn't coming today," he said. "The driver was drunk and got into a crash. Everybody on board was killed." The way he said this last part, almost cheerful, made my stomach turn. I wasn't sure if I really believed him, but I decided I would leave anyway. I felt a strong urge to put as much distance between him and me as possible. "Oh," I replied. "I guess I'll have to walk it." "Yes," he said, "you will. Here, take my umbrella." He extended the umbrella out toward me, and without thinking, I accepted it. My fingers briefly brushed the skin of his hand, and a shiver shot through my entire body. The next day I saw the bus crash on the news, except it had happened after my stop. Just as the man said, everyone on board died. And if it weren't for him, I would have been on board too. The next time I saw the demon was during my sophomore year of college. He was waiting for me in my dorm room, hunched over my desk and reading one of my books. "It's you," I said. "Yes," he replied. "It's me." He calmly shut the book and turned to face me, beaming his crooked-toothed grin. "I brought you a present," he said. My stomach squirmed. "You did?" I asked. "Oh, yes." He reached a hand inside the lapel of his jacket and retrieved the pink spiral notebook. The name Ellen Hartwell was printed on the cover. "This belongs to the pretty brunette in your psychology class," he said. "The one you're always staring at. You will tell her you found it and then ask her out to dinner." He set it down on my desk. "Oh," I said. "Thanks." "No thanks necessary," the man said. "I'll see you again." In that moment I blinked, and he disappeared. The final time I saw the demon was the night my son was conceived. My wife Ellen was waiting in the bedroom while I took a quick shower. I stepped out naked and dripping wet to see the man standing in my bathroom. "Hello, friend," he said. "You scared me," I replied. "I know," he said. "Listen to me. Tonight you are going to talk to your wife. She is ready to have children, but she doesn't know it yet. She will conceive your son tonight." My heart swelled at the thought of a son, but my stomach was less optimistic, and it squirmed with uneasiness. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. The man smiled widely. "The strands of fate are long," he said. "Much longer than a single human life." He snapped his fingers and disappeared in a mist of blue and grey smoke. The man never visited again after that, but sometimes I would get that uneasy feeling at the pit of my stomach that accompanied his presence. Years passed, then decades, and gradually I forgot all about him. Until the day the police came. They came with bloodhounds and shovels, and they turned my entire property inside out. After all was said and done, they'd found the remains of 37 women and arrested my only son. My son claimed throughout the trial that a demon had forced him to commit the murders, but the prosecution did not believe it, and he was sentenced to death. But I recognized the demon from the thousands of sketches that filled his notebooks. It was a gaunt-faced man with a wide, friendly smile of crooked, dead grey teeth.
To those who sleep. This happened a few years ago. You may have heard rumors if you're on campus. Some even circulated online. Nobody knew what really happened, because I'm the only one who knows, and I kept quiet, for a multitude of reasons. None of them matter now. Here's what really happened. The four of us were handpicked for this experiment by Professor Richardson, because we had all studied under him, worked under him, and, as much as anyone can, earned his confidence. He said this one was different. We had to keep it quiet. We wanted to keep details to a minimum. All he would tell us before going in was that he required a month of our lives, and that if he succeeded, sleep would never again be a necessity. Think of it, he said. 6 to 8 additional hours every day. Will be paid back before the year is out. If he was right, he would win a Nobel Prize for sure. It would change the world. We believed in him. Sleep would become a hobby. Imagine that. We felt lucky to be part of it. We went in with the highest of hopes. We were so excited for a new future for humanity and for ourselves. I was the only one to leave that place. Week 1. Professor Richardson brought us out to the location in his van, explaining along the way what we were to do. For the purposes of the study, we were asked to remain in the compound, as he called it. We would be locked in fact, and deprived of windows and Wi-Fi. Other than endure patiently, we didn't really have to do much of anything. My machine does all the work, he explained. It uses a complex melange of sound waves to disrupt the process of sleep, evolutionary appendices from the days before civilization. The most immediate side effect you'll notice is that you won't dream. Any other effects we notice, we were to catalog. We were, as he said, in uncharted territory, and we had to map out the dangers. The immensity of this project was inspiring enough. Then, we saw the compound, the octagon, as it was known, a concrete, octagonal structure built at the end of the labyrinth of dirt roads somewhere in the backwoods of Searcy, Arkansas. I've never been able to find it again. The professor said it was originally intended as a jail for terrorists, but it was abandoned and never used. It's virtually impenetrable, invisible to satellites, but for us, it had been stocked with all the comforts we required for a month of dedication. I don't know if anyone expected us to really conquer sleep. We thought, perhaps, a reduction in sleep requirements could be possible. We spent a fair amount of the first 2 days speculating how this machine works with its complex melange of sound waves, and whether sleep really is an evolutionary appendix, as the professor had claimed. By the third day of only getting 3 to 4 hours of sleep, contrary to feeling groggy, we were more awake and full of energy than ever. We were alert and ready to debate these ideas. That's when the excitement really hit us. "He really did it," JT said. JT was a big, ginger-bearded guy, the sort of guy who still has a healthy collection of magic cards. "We don't know that," James said, always a skeptic. He came from Australia just to study under Richardson. The machine could be stimulating the adrenaline glands to mildly dose us with adrenaline all throughout the day. Even were that so, it wouldn't change the fact that he beat sleep, I said. With our extra time, we were getting in tons of reading, playing a stupid amount of Call of Duty, and still had plenty of time to sit around and debate. "I guess I have to admit, it's fucking amazing," James said. We all felt it. It was almost euphoric, the excitement we felt for being possibly the first humans to live without the need for sleep. Technically, we still needed a few hours each night still, but we decided together that was more out of habit than a necessity. Then on the 4th day, Don said, "There's something wrong." Don was a serious one, superstitious. He used to be a Franciscan, I heard. It showed. He didn't talk that much, and when he did, it was usually worth listening to. This time, he put into words something I'd been feeling, but I guess just kind of blurred over the excitement. With the experiment or... That was JT. I don't know. He said, "It's a feeling. This constant uneasiness. Like this isn't going the way it's supposed to be going, or we're in the wrong place." No, James said. "I think that's it. It's this place. We all knew it was weird when we first saw it. This concrete octagon. But living in it, I think there's something wrong with this place. Like, something terrible happened here." "I understood it was never used," I said. "Governments always say that about torture prisons," James said. "It's more than that," JT said. "I feel it too. I thought it was just from lacking windows at first, but that's not it. I think it's the angles. It's like the angles in this building don't add up to what they should." "What if everyone's dead outside?" Dawn asked. James jumps up so fast his chair clattered to the ground. "Cut that shit out, Dawn. Why would you even say that?" "Well, what are you saying?" I asked. "This is a haunted octagon?" "Yeah, James," JT said. "Was it built on an octagonal Indian burial ground?" "Okay, you want to play that?" he said. "I can play. Look, the space around us transforms based on how we perceive it. Take a church. The people who go there perceive it as holy, so they do things, like leave their crutches behind when they force themselves to walk, or light their candles or whatever. These changes to the space only enhance the perception of holiness and influence future visitors to perceive it in the same way and change it in the same way. Haunted places are the same. For one reason or another, they begin to be perceived as haunted. The more they're perceived that way, the more they're imbued with hauntedness. Even if you've never seen this place before, you picked up on the subtle clues, if you're at all sensitive. In a way, it's true to say it's a haunted place. It's true to say the church is holy. Our interaction with this space has made it something more than just wood and sheetrock, or whatever. So what I'm saying is, maybe some things happen here, we're picking up on it. Some bloody, awful things. And in that sense, yes, it's a haunted octagon. No, Don said. Places are considered holy because the authority telegraphs it to whoever who will listen. Just like haunted places make a lot of money off a dumb tourist. Whatever it is, I said. We all agree something isn't feeling right about our situation. Maybe it's the machine. I say we write it down as a side effect. On that point, at least, we were all able to agree. It didn't put any of our uneasiness at rest, but we wrote it down. We somehow agreed upon the phrasing right away, too. Acute sensations that we've entered into something where we aren't welcome. Week 2. We tried our best to ignore these feelings and carry on like we had been. Those first few days had been some of the best in our adult lives, but we never got back to those happy times. I realized around then how short-sighted of Richardson it had been to leave us here without any means of contacting the outside world. When I voiced that opinion, "That's just what I've been thinking," JT said. "Richardson isn't a dumb guy, you get me? I think he did it on purpose." "Why would he do that?" I asked him. "For science, of course. That we're told it's about one thing, but it's actually about how we react to the experiment. Like the Milgram experiments." "Or it's not his choice," James said. "The government is making him do it, and that machine is designed to control us. Or some sort of cult." "This is a government-built installation," JT said. "That actually makes sense. Not the Scientology part, though." "Think about it," James started, but I interrupted. Okay, I said. "Let's come back down to earth for a second. Best case scenario, Richardson is just a jerk who doesn't care about our personal well-being, right?" "Give it a rest," Don said. The one I least expected to snap at me. "Stop trying to act like the most rational guy in the room. You don't know what Richardson is into. He's into other things he'll never talk about publicly." I looked at the others and saw similar confusion. "What are you talking about?" "I've heard a little bit about this, actually," James said. "He has some fringe ideas. Let's just say he's not the respected academic he presents himself to be," Don said. "I've read some content he doesn't publish. He thinks, and very seriously believes, that there's something else. Something besides this." He knocked on the table. "Something more material stuff." "That's not completely strange," I said with a shrug. "I was expecting worse." "He put it this way," Don continued, ignoring me. "Think back to the beginning of existence. There had to be conditions, such as the universe's existence was possible. If the universe wasn't possible, then it couldn't have come to exist. Does that stand to reason?" We nodded. "Okay. Since those came into being with the existence of the universe. So whatever those conditions are, they have to be something other than basic substance of the universe. Does that make sense?" "I guess," I said. "This isn't turning into an argument for God, is it?" He shook his head. "It's an argument for something that continues to exist. Except, we can't even say that, because ideas like something and exist are developed by, for, and within physical reality. This is something pre-physical, something pre-existence. Whatever it is, allowed the universe to spontaneously be. Who knows what else it's been doing these billions of years." "Just asking that question is already violating the stipulations," I started saying, my background in philosophy kicking in. Yes, Don said, "but he believes. He thinks there's a source of free will. Our brains touch it somehow. And so he believes he can reach it, study it, use it." I didn't get to read much more than that. "And if this experiment is something he's not putting on the books," James added, "it may have to do with his more peculiar interest. So, instead of eliminating sleep, he's trying to make us see God?" I asked sarcastically. "I don't know, brother," Don said. "I'm just saying, if he thinks the brain touches another reality, this is just the kind of experiment he would want to try to prove his theory." "You think he has this room bugged?" JT asked. "I think he might be in here somewhere," I said, without even thinking of what I was saying. They looked at me, waiting for an explanation. and with what looked like fear in their eyes. Strange we should be so afraid of this man we admired less than 2 weeks ago. I sometimes feel someone watching me sleep, I explained, my voice starting to tremble. I figured it was one of you at first. I feel it especially when I'm not quite awake, but not quite asleep. Those moments when you wake for a few seconds to adjust your pillow. I could feel and see and hear someone standing over me, just breathing and watching. And I was too close to unconsciousness to do anything about it. Then, I just fell back to sleep. I could see the terror filling the other's eyes while I spoke. I've been feeling it too, Don said, almost in a whisper, like he was scared to be heard. I thought I was losing it. Me too, James said. Someone else is in here, I said. We drew closer, our eyes darting nervously around the gray concrete room. We were all feeling the same thing, I'm sure, that we were trapped inside this horrible building with someone or something else. Wait, JT said. What would this person be eating? We don't see our food disappearing. There's no way out. There isn't really anywhere to hide. We gotta start being sensible. I let out a sigh of relief, because he was right. Okay, let's think about this, I said. Let's say this is another effect of the machine. Phase 2, paranoia. Phase 2 paranoia, Don said, with a consenting nod. We wrote it down. The next day, we'd all gathered together for breakfast. JT asked, "Have you all had any dreams?" We all shook our heads. Richardson was right on the money with that one, I said. He said. Do you know feral children don't dream? How do we know that? James asked. They tell us. The few that get socialized. They say dreaming is something that starts only after, when they have language, object permanence, and all that shit. What about dogs? I asked. Like, chasing rabbits in their sleep. Automatic responses. Maybe language and object permanence impacts only the ability to remember dreams, James said. Both are consistent with superficial data. The onus is on you to prove otherwise. JG scoffed. What's your point anyway? Don asked. The point is, being dreamless. Do you think it's healthy? I don't think it's healthy. I think the machine isn't making us not sleep. It's not making us feel tired. I think all this might be happening because we aren't dreaming. We can't really answer, can we? James said. Dreams naturally accompany REM sleep. So we don't have any studies that differentiate between the effects of not dreaming and not sleeping. Or maybe we are dreaming, and the dreams are just going somewhere else, JT said. I don't know what he meant by that. Nobody did. But we all stopped talking and then dispersed. Something about it felt too true. Week 3. Our gatherings for theoretical discussions became rarer and rarer. We tended to isolate ourselves and eyed each other with suspicion. I still had those feelings of uneasiness and unwelcomeness every day. And of each night, the figure standing over me, I was sleeping even less now, about an hour tops. So little sleep that I started to catch it running away. The last time, I was awake to see where it was going. It's this one particular corner of my room that always struck me as strange. I caught myself staring at it, even when I didn't want to. It's a point where the angles are weird. My eyes had trouble focusing on it. The figure skulked straight to that point, and disappeared into it. When I woke up fully, I questioned whether I had hallucinated the whole thing. Perhaps. Phase 3 hallucinations. I went over to that corner, and looked at it closely. It smelled strange, like turpentine. Then, the more I stared at it, the more I forced my eyes to focus. I was sure something was moving inside, and it was watching me. I heard this awful, hate-filled sound come from deep in that corner then. I didn't wait around to understand what made that noise. I left that room for good. I took all my short naps in the library from then on. While lying in the library, I overheard JT talking to someone in the corridor. He was telling him about the angles again. He said there's more degrees in the building than can possibly be in a standard enclosed shape. 2.7 for 88 degrees more, he said. Just enough to drive you nuts, but not enough to be obvious. Whoever he was talking to said something I didn't understand. Something like, those are the degrees of ripping. The voice was distorted somehow, so I can't be sure. What I was sure, I didn't recognize that voice at all. Whoever JT was talking to wasn't one of us. Maybe silly, but I was scared. I stayed there, pretending to be asleep, while JT walked by. As he did, I felt someone, or something, come into the room and stand over me. Then, it went away. After a minute or so of telling myself I was being foolish, I went following after JT. I didn't see him anywhere. I bumped into James, and he also said he hadn't seen JT. Have you heard or seen anyone who shouldn't be in here? I asked him. James looked at me with a mixture of surprise and terror. How'd you know? He asked. I haven't told anyone. About what? He told me he'd heard his mother calling to him, not a faint sound that he confused for his mother, but her voice, clear as mine, calling out to him. He almost answered her, he said. Almost. Then he stopped himself. She's been dead for a year, man, he said. Whatever was calling me, it wasn't my mother. I saw he was shaking, and his hands were clenched. I told him to hang in there. It might be oral hallucinations. I've been hearing things too. A crying child. So low at first, I thought it was the plumbing. We should call a meeting, he said. I thought about JT and what I heard moments ago. Let's just tell Don, I said. As a side effect of the machine, it makes sense, Don said after we told him. The sounds are not supposed to be audible, yet somehow our brains must be picking up their random patterns and interpreting them as something. The brain assigns a memory to make the pattern meaningful. Do you believe that? I asked. Not for a second, James said. But we had a shortage of rational explanations, and that was a pretty good one. I'd hope he was right. A few days later, I found James in the gym, pounding away at the punching bag. I asked him if he was okay. He ignored me. So I went back to the reading room. A few minutes later, he was behind me. That voice I've been hearing is not my mother, he said. Of course not, I said. We'd already decided that after all. No, I mean, I don't know what I mean. It's just, my mother was a kind person. Even if this voice is trying to sound like her, it's not like her at all. It's not kind. It's not human. I put down my book and looked him full on to see if he was serious. He was. Very much so. She's been telling me all sorts of things, he said. She asked me if you remember the shed. I couldn't say anything to that. I was speechless. I never talked about that. For good reason. It took me years to come to terms with what happened. It was a long time ago. I was out playing behind her house in the woods, as I often did. I like to construct shitty tree houses. I went a little off property, and then came to this shed. I'd never seen it before. It looked old though. I remember that. I remember a kid crying inside. Thinking I might have a friend to make tree houses with, I looked through the window. The kid was all chained up, and there was a dog bowl on the floor. I wanted to help, but I knew I was trespassing. I looked around. That's when I saw a man, off about 20 feet into the woods. He was dressed in all black, old-fashioned clothes, like 19th century clothes. He had been watching me the whole time, expressionless. I went running all the way home. I was so scared I didn't tell my parents about it until I was supposed to go to bed, and I had to explain why I was terrified to go to sleep. They had the cops out right away. They found the shed. I heard they found the chains in the bowl, but the kid was gone. I've always blamed myself for not helping the kid right away. Do you? James asked. Yes. Okay, well, She's been telling me how to get out. I looked at him without a word, because he sounded so manic. She said there's a secret exit inside JT. We just have to cut him open and get to it. James, I said, unsure what else to say at that point. Oh, I know, he said with a gulp. I know it's not true. I just had to tell someone. I don't know what's going on in this place, he added. I'm scared, man. So was I. We had to get out of that octagon. Week 4. James and I started looking for ways out after that. Since we weren't sleeping at all now, we had plenty of time to do it. Every time we thought we'd found something, it was a dead end. It was while we were doing this that we saw Don standing alone in the corridor with his back to us. What's going on? James asked. Something about it just seemed strange. Don, you okay? I called. He turned around with a smile and gave us a big wave. Bye guys, he said, and walked around the corner. I looked at James to see if he was thinking the same thing as me, that something bad was about to happen, and he was already looking back at me. We took running after him. He was at the end of the next corridor, already getting in the elevator. Don, no! We shouted and ran after him, but the doors closed before we got there. He went up. The thing is, the octagon is a 1-floor building. There's no elevator. Never before or after. I don't know where Don went, or if what I think I saw really happened. But I know I never saw Don again. I don't understand, James said. What's happening? Before we could take time to think about it, a group of people rounded the corner and were walking toward us. I think we should go, I said. Who are they? He asked. James, let's go. Why are they blurry? I don't know, but we're going. I grabbed his arm and pulled him with me. I ran. I ran until I got to the kitchen and hid myself between the wall and the fridge. I was sure James was right behind me. I could hear his footfall the whole way, but when I looked, he was gone. I stayed there until my body couldn't take it anymore, probably a few hours. When I slipped out, I saw someone peering at me from the doorway. I was so startled, I backed up against the wall. It was a little boy. Hello? I said. Then, I heard screams. The boy was gone. More screams. I couldn't just leave someone in distress. Not again. I ran toward the screams, scared of what might be happening to James. I heard the scream again, but this one choked out. It was coming from JT's room. I wished then, and I still wish I hadn't opened that door. James was in there. He sliced JT open, and he was feeling around in his guts. The shocked, agonized expression was frozen on JT's face. What did you do? I asked. I have to get out, James said, as he dug through JT's intestines. I backed out of the room. I didn't know what else to do. I just had to find somewhere to hide until Richardson could get us out of here. Once I was out of the room, I heard James saying, Mom? And then, oh no. Oh no. And then he screamed. I ran back. James was gone. The doorway to the room hadn't left my sight. There's no way he got out, but he was gone. And noxious, black smoke was coming from JT's abdomen. It smelled like burning tires. I went back to the kitchen. I found a supply of candles, melted some wax onto paper towels, and stuffed my ears with it. Then I curled up in the corner, with my eyes closed, and waited for sleep to come. I waited a long time, but eventually, it came. When I woke up, Professor Richardson was shaking me. He already pulled the paper towels out of my ears. I thought he'd come early. I found out later I'd been asleep for several days. He asked me where the others went. I told him everything, as much as I understood. I tried to take him to JT's body, but it was gone. Not a trace of blood. He took me to the hospital after that to make sure I was okay. I'll foot the bill, he said. Also, you can forget about your student loans. Is that how it is? I asked. I put you in danger, he said. So yes, you've earned it, if you keep quiet. I told him I couldn't keep quiet, because of what happened to the others. You don't think those things really happened, do you? Would all the laws of the physical universe suspend themselves just for you four? No, those are waking dreams. You weren't supposed to dream at all. I thought I'd compensated for it. The machine needs tweaking. That's science. The others are fine. They'll be laying low for a while, until I publish the results. Please do the same. I wanted to believe him. I've always considered myself a rational person. I just didn't believe him. Yes, it all could have been a dream. That would be the simplest explanation. But it was no dream. I tried to find the others. I never could. I don't think they're fine at all. I tried to tell the police about it, but they wanted evidence. I couldn't even show them the octagon. James, JT, Don, if you're out there and read this, let me know you're okay. And everyone else, let me tell you what I think. I think Professor Richardson was right about one thing. Sleep is really something we evolved to protect us. Except, not from the creatures that roam the forest at night. It protects us from something much worse. Something around us. It's not obsolete at all. Think whatever you believe in, that you have sleep, and you dream.
I've always had a weak heart. Not just physically. I've always been afraid of my own shadow. It was unsurprising when the doctors told me my heart murmur wasn't just a heart murmur. A year of tests, a year of therapy, constant trips to the hospital, and I was finally told that it had all been for nothing. My poor, weak heart wouldn't last till Christmas. It's a strange thing being told that you're dying. I didn't come to terms with it at first. I drank, and I spent my money. I did reckless, stupid things because I was so damn scared. Then I got the news that a young woman called Laura had been declared brain dead, and that I, the lucky chosen one, would be getting a brand new heart a week later. I drove to the hospital slowly, carefully, and readied myself for the ordeal that was to come. As I was lying in bed on the last night, the thought of Laura swirled around in my head and wouldn't leave me alone. It was like her name was in flashing lights every time I closed my eyes. It was wrong. I know it was, but I had to see the woman who was giving me her heart. It didn't feel right not to put a face to the one who was saving my life. I knew her name. I knew what ward she was staying on. I had overheard the two nurses discussing it. I wandered down the meandering hallways until I found what I was looking for. Taking my time, making sure I didn't miss any name, I guess I had time on my hands now. In the second to last room, she lay in bed. A woman sat on the bed next to her, holding her hand, and my own weak heart stuttered. "Excuse me." I had no idea what to say to her. "I'm Jenna. I'm the person. I'm having surgery tomorrow," and what I assumed was Laura's mother stood up, and I could tell from the look in her eye that she knew who I was. "Thank you for visiting. I know it's strange, but a part of her is going to be living on in you. I wanted to meet you." I stood there, helpless and lost for words. Laura's mother beckoned me over. "Please," she said, "don't feel uncomfortable. It's what she would have wanted." I sat on the chair next to Laura. How did she... I broke off. It was too awful to ask. Laura's mother gave me a thin smile. "She was a care worker. Looked after battered wives, abused women. Last month she met a guy and, well, I suppose years of training can't help you when you're in love. She ignored the warning signs and he killed her. She dedicated her life to those who needed her." Laura's mother looked down. I don't know why I did it, but I reached over and held Laura's hand. I squeezed it. "I'm so sorry. I had a boyfriend once who... he was like that too. Someone like Laura convinced me to leave." Laura's mother gave me another half smile, and I could see the tears in her eyes. Then Laura squeezed my hand. Tightly. She gripped me so hard that her fingernails dug into my skin. I recoiled, a look of horror on my face. Laura's mother looked at me calmly. She squeezes my hand sometimes as well. I think the doctors called it muscle spasms. Either way, there's none of Laura left in there anymore. I looked at the small crescent moons that just started to bleed on the palm of my hand. The surgery went perfectly. I was wheeled to the recovery suite after it was over and done with, the raised wound on my chest covered by gauze. It was better if I didn't see it, I thought. I didn't need any more heart issues. I spent the first day doped up and on the pain medication, eating only a little, and sitting up maybe 2 times. It was a long process, they reassured me. Laura's mother came to visit me the day before I was due to leave. Her calm demeanor hadn't wavered, but I could see that she was suffering. She looked 10 years older, and her hands shook when she gave me a hug. "When are you going home?" "Tomorrow," I told her. "Please come visit whenever you want." I started to jot my address down for her when out of the corner of my eye, a flash of blonde disappeared through the doorway. The same brilliant blonde as Laura's hair. "Ow!" I cried suddenly. It felt like someone had sharply squeezed my hand so hard that it had almost crushed the bones. Laura's mother rushed to my side, a look of concern in her eyes. "What's wrong? Is it your heart?" She stumbled over the last words, coming to terms with what she had said. I tried to reassure her, and I said I'd let the doctors know, and she left with a look of worry on her face. When I looked down, a new set of crescent fingernail marks were below the ones that Lars had made. 10 identical bleeding smiles. The taxi ride home was short, and before I knew it, I was back on my own flat. It felt strange to try and slot back to where I had left off. My life had been almost over the last time I had been here. I looked over the mess and the cardboard boxes, the remnants of one night where I had tearfully tried to pack and store my belongings so my parents wouldn't have to do it when I died. Laura's heart beat so strongly. It felt like it would come out of my chest. It did this all the time, and I realized this was what a healthy heart must feel like. So why couldn't I shake my feeling of unease? That night, I had a dream. Laura was in her hospital bed, but her mother was gone. I could hear my heart, Laura's heart, beating in my eardrums so loudly it was painful. I tried to cover them, but my hands were pinned to my sides. Some unexplainable force was moving me towards the motionless figure of Laura on the bed. Her lips were blue, and the window had come open, whipping her blonde hair around her face. I was almost on top of her when her eyes flew open. They were milky white, the eyes of someone dead. "Get out," she rasped, her voice guttural. I could hear the heartbeat faster and faster, drumming until I thought I couldn't take it anymore. Then I woke up. The sound had been real. Laura's heart was so loud it felt like it would rupture in my eardrums. I screamed in agony, trying to cover my ears. It was useless. It was coming from some deep place inside of me. I could feel it reverberating around the hollows of my chest. I stumbled out of bed, gasping for air, and tried to find my phone. I needed to call someone. Anyone. An ambulance or my mom. Anyone that would pick up. "Get out." It was a faint whisper over the hammering thumps of Laura's heart, a low, guttural voice that sounded like it had been made by an animal, and I crawled to the door, down the hallway, choking on my screams for help. My neighbor opened the door, his eyes wide as saucers at the sight of me on the floor, clutching my chest. He drove me to the hospital as I cried in the passenger seat of his car. After about 50 different checkups, the doctors told me that absolutely nothing was wrong with me. They told me my heart was regular, my blood pressure was normal, and that everything was just going swimmingly. I stood in the waiting area, wallowing in my shame and frustration. That heart didn't belong to me. My phone buzzed on the counter, an unknown number. Great. That was all I needed. More unexplained, scary things like a stranger on the end of a phone. My voice sounded small on the line. "Hello? Good morning. This is the Thames Valley Police. We've called to report on an incident that occurred in your flat around 1:30 a.m. today." I felt a wave of embarrassment. I'm so sorry. I recently had a surgery and I wasn't feeling well. I had to have my neighbor drive me to the hospital, and I think I panicked a little in the hallway before I left. There was a small silence on the other end of the phone. I'm afraid this is something you might want to be sitting down for. I felt Laura's heartbeats, strong and calm. There was an incident of forced entry by Mr. Samuel Matthews. According to our police records, he's your ex-partner and filed a restraining order against him in September 2017. My blood ran cold. I did. He's in police custody. We found an automatic weapon on him, and we believe he had the intent to harm you. We have an officer currently stationed at your flat who can fill you in depending on how long your hospital stay will be. I thanked him and hung up the phone. For a moment, I leaned against the wall, the horror slowly spreading over me. If I had been in my flat 10 minutes later, he would have found me. Laura's heartbeats filled my ears again, but now they were gentle, calming. Her mother said she dedicated every part of her to helping those who needed it. I put both my hands on my chest, overwhelmed by my own gratitude, and listened to Laura.
My neighbor is one of those annoying wannabe YouTube personalities. Over the years, I've seen him cough out cinnamon, lay flat on the hood of his car as it slowly crept down the driveway, and even douse himself in lukewarm water. All the while screaming epic win or epic fail or epic maintenance of the status quo, bro, for all I know. It can get tiring to watch him go about his shenanigans in the pursuit of viral fame. So, when he knocked on my door the other day, told me he was going away for a few weeks and asked that I get his mail, honestly, it was a relief. I can't explain the peace of mind I had, knowing I didn't have to brace myself for any of his stupidity for a while. I was always afraid his stunts would wind up bleeding over into my life. Things were pretty normal for the first couple of days. He received a few bills, a bit of spam. Then, one evening, I got home to find a cardboard box waiting on his front porch. In big red letters was written, "Return to sender." I'm no small fry, but I admit I had trouble lifting the box on my own. It was extremely heavy, and lugging it across the road to my house was even harder, and I quickly realized that there was no way I was going to drag it up the stairs and through my front door. I decided I would leave his package in my garage. It wasn't like I kept my car in there. The garage door was a piece of shit that refused to open without a good thud and a whack. It was less trouble just leaving the car in the driveway than it was to fight with the garage door every morning and night. In hindsight, I should have just set the package down when I struggled to open the tricky door. But you know how it is when you've got a good grip on something. There's no point in setting it down if you don't have to. It was as I kicked the door for a third time that I lost my grip on the package, and it fell to the ground. I heard a light crack inside. Shit, I cursed. I hoped I hadn't broken anything important, but figured I just wouldn't tell my neighbor about it and let him assume the break happened en route. With my hands free, I finally managed to get the garage door unstuck, and boy did it screech in protest as it rolled up and over me. I dragged the box the rest of the way, setting it in the corner for whenever my neighbor would come back to claim it. And then, I forgot all about it. Until a few days passed, that is. I'm not sure how long it took for the smell to waft in from the crack under the garage to house door, but it came in slow progression. It was a sickly sweet odor, similar to a skunk, and for the first few days after I smelled it, I genuinely assumed that's exactly what it was. Roadkill that had left its mark on my house. It was only when I realized the scent was growing more intense instead of fading that I went looking for a source. That's when I opened the garage door, and that's when the odor knocked me back, holding my nose. The culprit wasn't hard to find. The only change in my garage was the box in the corner. I remember thinking it must have been one of those meat of the month subscription boxes. The meat must have gone rancid from being left out of the fridge for so long. How much meat could have been in there for the box to have been so large and heavy? An entire fucking cow? I covered my nose as I approached the box, a pair of scissors in my hands. I probably wouldn't have needed them to open it, as it had become soggy enough at the bottom to poke through with a finger. But I wasn't about to poke my finger into spoiled meat juices. That soggy bottom was the reason I had to open the box in the first place. If I tried to drag it out whole, everything would spill onto the floor. I was going to have to dump the pieces of meat one garbage bag at a time and take them down to the dumpster. a process I was not looking forward to. My scissors tore through the tape along the top of the cardboard box, but as I flipped the flaps open, I discovered a whole new level of stink. It was like opening a burning oven, but instead of a heat wave, I was met with waves of piss, sweat, shit, and putrefaction. It was so bad that I staggered back and had to force down the puke, begging to guzzle out of me. I don't think I could have handled that scent, mingling with the horrors coming out of the box. I'm not ashamed to admit I ran out the door for a breath of fresh air. But in the short time that I'd spent in the garage, the smell had become so ingrained in the fabric of my clothes that it clung to me like a shadow. Nothing I tried could keep the smell out of my nostrils. Not air fresheners, not a face mask, not 3 showers and a change of clothes. Every second that box lay open in my garage was another second the smell was allowed a foothold in my home. I had to bite the bullet. I returned to the garage, the flaps of the box still open as though inviting me to look. I was prepared, a clothespin pinning my nostrils shut, a garbage bag in one hand, the strongest cleaner I could find in the other, and long rubber gloves to keep my skin from having to touch whatever was inside. But as it turns out, I needed none of those things. I wouldn't have to touch or clean the contents of that box. I would only have to suffer the nightmares every night. You see, there was meat in that box, but it didn't come from a cow or a pig. No, it was worse than that. It was my neighbor, dead. Still in one piece, but dead. I called the cops, and naturally, they took me in for an interrogation. It's kind of hard not to suspect the man with a corpse in his garage after all. Thankfully, they soon realized I wasn't involved. My DNA might have been all over that box, and the smell might have left a mark throughout my house, but there's one piece of irrefutable evidence in my neighbor's own hands that proved my innocence. A vlogging camera. They showed me the footage only once. I'm not even sure if they were allowed to, or if they felt so bad for me that they figured it couldn't hurt. But either way, I saw it. You see, my neighbor was sitting in the box, outside of a shipping facility, laughing as he told the world how he was going to mail himself across state lines. He'd brought pee bottles, food, a pillow, and even a few flashlights. His friend, some guy that I'd seen at his place several times to help with stunts, closed the lid and presumably dropped him off for shipment. Throughout the next couple of hours, or days, I'm honestly not sure, my neighbor recorded a few short clips about his progress, saying shit like, "I think I'm in a truck now, I can feel it moving," or "Must be in a warehouse, pretty warm here, still got plenty of food," that kind of stuff. And then, on the last entry, the box toppled over. He broke his neck, and that was it. The camera recorded until either the memory card got too full, or the battery died. There's one thing I didn't tell the police after they showed me the video. One thing I heard in the footage that will haunt me to the day I die. Just after the tumble that broke his neck, I heard the familiar screeching sound of my garage door.
My neighbor brought over some baby shoes the other day. They were pink and had glitter on the toes and sequined flowers on the side. We cooed over them for a few minutes, and I told her how much I appreciated the gift. After she left, I threw them in my bedroom closet with all the other baby junk I'd been given over the past 6 months. 6 months ago, everyone in town started to ask about my baby. I do not have a baby. I have never given birth or even been pregnant. I thought that I was being mistaken for someone else. I mean, I'm not particularly unique looking. Maybe some other short, dark-haired, and hazel-eyed girl gave birth recently. But I am shy by nature and southern by birth, so I was too polite to say, "You're wrong, you have the wrong person, I don't have a baby." I said things like, oh, okay. Mostly because it must have been a case of mistaken identity. People brought over baby clothes, a crib, a swing that plugs into the wall and jiggles, toys and shoes and diapers. A very weird situation to be in, for sure. But then, to put it plainly, things got weirder. I was in the grocery store and the manager, a friendly older man, came up to me and asked about my sweet little girl. He asked if she liked the different formula he had suggested and if I wanted more. I just smiled. When I got home, I found formula in my grocery bags and an almost empty can in my cabinet. I don't even remember putting it in my cart. The thing is, everyone has been so nice to me, and the situation is just so odd that I started to go along with it. "How's the little darling today?" a neighbor would ask when I went to get the mail. "Oh, she's wonderful, sleeping through the night," I'd answer. Then a young woman that got coffee at the same place as me asked about a play date with her 9-month-old and my then 5-month-old. I sort of blew it off. Next time I saw her, though, she talked about setting up another play date and how much fun our two darlings had. She showed me a picture on her phone. Aren't they just precious in this picture? Your little girl has the most beautiful blue eyes. Her dress really makes them pop. Here, I'll text this to you. I looked at the picture and saw a chubby baby in a red shirt and blue shorts. It had dark hair and dark eyes. It was the only baby in the picture. I went home and opened my bedroom closet, full of baby junk. I pulled out teddy bears and an unopened box with a changing table in it. I pulled out a shopping bag with new baby clothes. I dumped it out onto my bed and looked through them. I found a light blue dress. A few weeks ago, I decided to call my mom. "Hello," she answered. "Mom, it's me," I said. "Oh, Pearl, hi. How are you?" I asked. We don't talk often. "I'm good. We're all good out here," she paused and asked. "And how are you two doing?" "Us too?" I asked hesitantly. "Now don't act like that. I know I haven't been in touch much, but I do care about you and my grandbaby," she said sourly. "Oh, I know, Mom. She's crying. I gotta go," I lied. "Well, give Holly my love," she said, and then hung up before I did. The funny thing is, Breakfast at Tiffany's has been my favorite book since I was a kid. I'd always thought Holly would be a great name for a kid I would eventually have. I went into my room to put my phone down after my short conversation with my mom. The changing table and the crib were neatly set up by the window. I didn't do that. I'm sure I didn't. I walked over to the crib and looked inside. Nothing was there. I walked over to the changing table, then took a step back before I bumped my shin against one of the legs, because I remembered that I had done that before. I looked down and saw a bruise on my shin. I know I hit it against the changing table, but I also know they weren't in here before. I know it. "How's Holly today?" my neighbor across the street asked. We were both out grabbing our mail. "She's good, happy as ever," I said. "All her screaming up a storm when you came home last night. I'd be surprised if you were able to get her to bed at all." "Once she lays down, it usually doesn't take too long," I replied. I went inside and looked through my mail. A bunch of junk and a few red envelopes. I put everything down on the kitchen counter and opened a cabinet to get out a cup. I heard some noises coming from my room. I paused and listened. I didn't hear anything for a minute, so I grabbed the cup and got some water from the sink. I heard something over the sound of the tap. Holly must be awake. I went into my room and looked down in the crib. Holly's stuffed elephant was in the crib. I reached down and picked it up. It was cute. No wonder someone got it for Holly. I put the elephant back down in the crib and brought the cup to my mouth to take a sip. I realized I was holding a baby bottle. Mom brain, I thought. Where did I put my cup down? But then I saw I was holding my cup. And I'm not a mom. What the fuck was I thinking? I looked back over at the crib. Why do I still have this crap in my room? I kicked the crib, then I kicked it again and then again until the wood began to splinter. I pushed the changing table over on its side. I opened my closet and shoved in the pieces of the crib and any other baby-related item I could find. I slammed the closet door. I can't keep this charade up, I decided. I can't go along with this nonsense anymore. I went to get coffee this morning. I was so tired. I felt like I hadn't slept at all. The barista smiled at me. "Your kid keep you up?" she asked. "No," I said firmly. Her smile wavered. I sat down at a table to drink my coffee. Some woman walked up to me. She asked how I was doing and how my daughter was doing. "I'm fine," I answered and left it at that. She sat down at the table and, in a hushed and concerned voice, she asked me if I was experiencing any depression. She said that new mothers often feel like this. "I'm not a new mother," I said. A man came in and walked quickly up to the table. He bent down and whispered something in my ear. It didn't register at first. "What?" I asked. "You left your kid in her car seat in your car," he said again. I jumped up and ran outside. I unlocked my car and opened the back seat. How could I be so stupid? How fucked up am I to leave a kid in the car? But nothing was there. No kid, no car seat. I drove home. I sat on my bed and looked through the pictures on my phone. I looked at the picture of the chubby kid in the red shirt. I stared at it. Where is she? Where is Holly? There's only one kid in this picture, but everyone else says there are two. Chubbs and my little Holly. Bright blue eyes, blue dress. She does look so pretty in that blue dress. Now I have a bit more to write, but Holly just started to cry. I need to go check on her.
I found something horrific on a YouTube cooking channel. The internet is the most powerful informational tool the world has ever known, a font of knowledge that would have had Renaissance thinkers green with envy. But there are things out there beyond the limits of our knowledge, things we really don't want to know. Last night, I found one. I absolutely adore cooking. It's where art and science intersect, a perfect union of creativity and tradition that I find intensely rewarding. Naturally, I looked at YouTube and there's hundreds of cooking channels for both inspiration and insight. One channel is run by an Asian chef who's based in mainland China. None of his videos are in English, and the entirety of the text is in Chinese. But the language of cooking transcends all, and his videos are easy to follow thanks to the visual demonstrations. The most popular videos are of pretty staple Asian cuisine, fried rice and dumplings, just to name a few. But as I dive deeper, I found the dishes to be more outlandish and, quite frankly, shocking. One video has him playing with a bamboo rat. Small rodents resembling a guinea pig, but furry and cute nonetheless. The chef was feeding peanuts to it, lavishing the little critter with affection. Yet, to my absolute horror, the next scene showed him snapping the thing's neck as it screeched in distress. A few scenes of snap editing showed him butchering the thing before seasoning and cooking the meat. I was disturbed, but who am I to cast judgment just because of a few traditional, albeit unusual delicacies? Then, my eyes locking onto thumbnails depicting the smiling chef holding what I assumed to be organ meats. Dark, gelatinous masses of gore that he sliced up and deep-fried. My curiosity piqued. Yet, without any English captions or descriptions, there was no way of me knowing what those meats were. I resumed scrolling, only to be greeted by a thumbnail that set my stomach into knots. It was a human foot, cradled next to the chef's ever-smiling face. I watched, horrified, as he stripped away the meat around the long, thin bones before shallow frying it. Fake. It has to be fake, I thought to myself. The next video made me gasp in terror. A woman, bound in a dark cellar, completely shaven, with her eyes plucked out. The chef took out a hatchet, and I watched her body grow limp as he separated her head from her shoulders. The head was then slow roasted until it browned. I vomited into a nearby trash can. I reported the channel, and it has now been taken down, hopefully pending a criminal investigation. But this morning, I found a note on my front door. On it was a single character, a Chinese character. I had to know what it said, so I took it to a local Chinese takeout and asked the guy behind the counter. He looked at me nervous with sad eyes. Meat was all he said.